Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between rolling hills and a sparkling lake, lived a young man named Alex. Alex was known throughout the village for his incredible talent as a carpenter. His ability to take a simple block of wood and transform it into a beautiful piece of furniture was nothing short of magical. However, despite his success and the admiration of those around him, Alex was a deeply unhappy man. You see, Alex suffered from a troubled mind. He was a man who overthought everything. No matter how small or insignificant a decision, he would spend hours upon hours agonizing over it. Should he use oak or maple for his next project? Should he charge more for his services? Should he move to the city and open a shop there instead? These are the kinds of questions that plagued his mind, and they made him miserable. One day, overwhelmed by the constant noise of his own thoughts, Alex decided to seek help. He went to see the wisest man in the village, an old monk who lived in a small hut on the outskirts of town. The monk listened patiently to Alex's tale of woe, and when the young man was finished, he simply smiled and said, "My son, you have a wonderful gift, but you are wasting it. You are a talented carpenter, but you are not using your skills to their fullest potential because you are always stuck in your head." Alex was confused. "But how can I stop thinking so much? How can I quiet the noise inside my head?" The monk smiled again and said, "I want you to do something for me. Come back here tomorrow morning at sunrise and bring a hammer with you." Alex was puzzled, but he agreed. The next morning, just as the sun began to peek over the horizon, Alex arrived at the monk's hut with a hammer in hand. "Good," said the monk. "Now I want you to stand outside my hut, and every time you hear a bird singing, strike the ground with that hammer as hard as you can." Alex was taken aback. "But why, monk?" he asked. And the monk replied, "Just do as I say and you will see." So Alex stood outside the hut all day, and every time he heard the cheerful song of a bird, he swung his hammer down on the ground. At first, the sound of the hammer echoed through the quiet village, startling the birds and silencing their songs. But as the day wore on, more and more birds began to sing, and with each hammer strike, Alex felt a sense of calm washing over him. It was as if the more he focused on the physical world around him and the tasks at hand, the less he was consumed by his thoughts. As the sun began its slow descent, the monk came out of the hut and said, "My son, you have learned a valuable lesson today, haven't you?" Alex, still a bit confused, nodded slowly. The world is full of distractions, and it is easy to get caught up in our thoughts and worries. But sometimes we need to focus on the present moment, on the things we can control. When you were hammering the ground earlier, you couldn't help but notice the birds singing, right? Alex nodded again. "And did you stop to think about who was singing or why they were singing?" the monk asked gently. Alex shook his head. "No, monk, I wasn't thinking about that at all. I was focused on the task at hand, on the sound of the hammer and the feel of it in my hand." The monk smiled. "That is exactly what I am talking about. When you are focused on the present moment, when you are fully engaged in what you are doing, you cannot help but feel at peace. There is no room for overthinking, for worrying about the past or the future. It is only when we allow our minds to wander that we begin to suffer." Alex thought about this as he walked home that evening. He realized that the monk was right. For years, he had been a prisoner of his own mind, a slave to his thoughts. But today, he had experienced a different way of being. He had learned that it was possible to focus on the present moment, to be fully engaged in his work, and to find peace in the process. From that day forward, Alex's life was transformed. He continued to work as a carpenter, creating beautiful pieces of furniture that were in demand throughout the land. But now he approached his work with a different mindset. He was no longer the same troubled young man who overthought everything. Instead, he was a man who had found peace in the present moment. Whenever he felt his thoughts beginning to race, he would take a deep breath and focus on the task at hand, on the feel of the wood beneath his hammer, on the sound of the saw as it cut through the wood. And as he worked, he found that his thoughts began to quiet. He was no longer a slave to his mind, but rather its master. One day, one of Alex's regular customers came to visit his workshop. It was a wealthy landowner who had commissioned many pieces of furniture from Alex over the years. But today, he was not there to buy furniture. He was there to seek help. "Alex, my friend," he began, "you have a reputation throughout the land for being not only a talented carpenter, but also a wise man. I have come to you today to ask for your advice." Alex looked up from his workbench. "What seems to be the problem, my friend?" he asked. The landowner sighed and ran a hand through his graying hair. "It is my son, William," he said. "He is a good boy, but he has a problem. He overthinks everything. No matter how small or insignificant a decision, he spends hours upon hours agonizing over it. This is causing him great distress, and I am worried for him." Alex listened patiently to the landowner's tale, and when he was finished, he nodded understandingly. "I know what it's like to be a prisoner of your own mind," he said. "I too have struggled with overthinking for many years." The landowner looked at Alex with hope in his eyes. "Then please, my friend, help him. Help my son." Alex smiled and said, "Of course." He then excused himself to the landowner and went out into the garden behind his house. There, in the shade of a large oak tree, he sat down on a nearby bench and began to think. He knew exactly what to do to help the young man. Earlier that year, Alex had received a letter from the monk informing him that he would be leaving the village and starting a new life in another part of the country. The monk had asked Alex to keep in touch, but the young carpenter hadn't yet found the courage to write back. Now, however, he knew exactly who he needed to contact. With a newfound determination, Alex went back into his house and wrote a long letter asking the monk for help. He explained the situation with the landowner as son and begged the monk to come back to the village and help the young man. As soon as the letter was finished, Alex sealed it up and sent it off with one of his workers who was traveling to the nearby city. A few days later, a reply arrived, and when Alex read the monk's letter, he smiled. The monk had accepted his request and was already on his way back to the village. As soon as the monk arrived, Alex took him to the landowner's house and introduced them. After hearing the landowner's tale, the monk turned to Alex and said, "We need to take the young man on a journey." Alex and the landowner were both confused, but they agreed to do whatever it took to help the young man. The following day, they set off. Together with the monk's guidance, they traveled for several weeks, visiting remote villages and talking to people from all walks of life. Finally, they reached a small cottage nestled in a clearing in the woods. "This is where we are staying," the monk told the landowner and Alex. The three of them spent several days at the cottage, and during that time the monk taught the young man how to live in the present moment, how to focus on the task at hand, and how to find peace in the process. When it was time for them to leave, the landowner thanked the monk profusely for his help and promised to pay him back for his services. But the monk waved his hand dismissively. "There is no need for payment," he said. "The only thing I ask is that you and Alex keep in touch. If you ever need my help again, do not hesitate to call on me." And so the landowner and his son returned home, with the knowledge that they would never forget. From that day forward, the young man was a changed person. He no longer overthought everything. Instead, he learned to live in the present moment, to be fully engaged in his work, and to find peace in the process. And as for Alex, he continued to create beautiful pieces of furniture, but now he also took on a new role, that of a mentor. Whenever he saw a young person struggling with overthinking, he would share his story and teach them how to find peace in the present moment. And so the tale of Alex the troubled carpenter became a legend in the village, a reminder to all who heard it that even the most troubled mind can find peace if only it will learn to live in the present moment.